Hello, my name is Charlie Hogan, and this is my week 3 submission for MFT 6102. And we're um, going to analyze a case and recommend a treatment plan for an individual that lives somewhere on the schizophrenia spectrum disorder. In this case, we're taking a look at Efren, who is a 23-year-old male who identifies as a second generation Filipino. He lives in the city of San Diego with his mother, father, and elder sister. Efren does not have a girlfriend, and according to him, he doesn't have many friends either. He is currently a student at university, and he is working a job as well. Now, upon watching the video, one of the things that stood out immediately was Efren's quiet, somewhat reserved demeanor. Um, he said he was mostly antisocial because of his past experiences of being bullied when he was a kid for being different, Filipino. Uh, Even within his own home, when everybody is there, everybody stays to themselves. There's not much dialogue there, so everybody is kind of doing their own thing. Mother and father's watching TV. Efren is in his room playing video games, and his sister is in her room watching TV. Efren's relationship with his family in general is strained, to say the least. Earlier in his life, his father was hardly home due to him being in the Navy and dealing with the constant deployment and things of that nature. His mother was hardly home due to the nature of her job, of being a nurse, long hours. He didn't really say much regarding his sister. He had only said that for a point in time she was kind of in and out of the house, and at one point she even decided to run away. That kind of paints a dark picture and gives us a little bit more insight into what Efren is dealing with. Now, he has said his relationship with his father was the most strained and fragmented. He mentioned how his family operated on like a hierarchy, and his father is at the top, and what he says goes. Other members of the family don't really get a voice, if you will. He recalled a moment from his youth where he had decided to no longer go to church because he wasn't a fan of the overly critical, judgy type environment. And when he had expressed that sentiment, when he had said, you know what, I'm not going to go to church, his father thereby threatened to kick him out of the house. You don't want to go to church, that's fine, but you can't live here. You live under my house, you're going to abide by my rules type deal. He didn't really mention, we know he's going to church and everything now, so he didn't really get much say there, but he never really mentioned if him and his father relationship fell apart after that, or if he was able, or if they were able to reconcile on any level, and take a step back from the mishap that took place. He didn't go into any detail about that. Whilst watching the video, we learned that Efren's grandmother had just passed recently, and Efren took that pretty hard. He felt like she was the one and only person in his family that truly understood him and accepted him for, who he was. And he felt this way, despite there not being much dialogue between them. Now, this is probably just because of the quality time they had shared over the years. Because, like I said, remember, even when he is with his family, he's not with his family. And it sounds like him and his grandma used to run errands and things of that nature. So just that connection right there made her passing hurt that much more. Um, the reason why Efren sought psychiatric services was due to a recent event in which he had locked himself in his room for a little over a week. Now, he did say he left his room from time to time if he needed to use the bathroom or get some food and or snacks from the kitchen. But he only did that when he was certain that no one was around to see him. After that event took place, he was hospitalized for about a week for psych evaluation purposes. He was also given medicine to treat some of the symptoms that manifested during this latest psychotic episode. Some of those symptoms may have presented themselves earlier, but we don't have enough information to go on to make that conclusion. The symptoms of psychosis that Efren was being treated for were auditory hallucinations and delusions. The auditory hallucinations that Efren was experiencing were voices. These voices varied, and they could either sound like some individual that he'd never met, or they could sound like his deceased grandmother. Now, typically, whenever you heard the voice of his deceased grandmother, it was a kind and supporting voice, offering words of encouragement and things of that nature. Whenever you heard the voice of a random individual, it was more likely to be negative. Now, these voices could occur at any time, but he had said that the negative and more harsh voices were more likely to occur during times of great stress, i.e. homework or church and things of that nature. Now, his delusions manifested as mass paranoia. Efren was convinced that his family, and even a therapist at one point that was interviewing him was plotting against him, using devices like recorders or cameras to monitor his every move and word. This is another reason why he decided or tried to avoid talking to the individuals of his immediate family or responding to their inquiries, because he was worried that they might use his actions and words against him. This was especially worrisome for Efren because he was thinking that if his condition, what he's undergoing at this time, was shared with the members of his extended family, that he would potentially lose that connection that he has with his cousins that he regularly plays video games with. Being the only family support since the passing of his grandmother that he feels he has left. He goes on to talk about the stigma associated with mental illness amongst the other members of his family, especially those of Filipino descent. He said that they might view him as crazy or, um, you know, almost like infected for going to therapy or hearing voices and taking medicine. He feels this immense pressure to sustain the status quo, if you will, to be as perfect as he can be. But in the back of his mind, he is still worried that his parents will basically let the cat out the bag, telling his relatives about his current condition and costing him his much needed friendships and family support. Now, despite all of this, Efren doesn't really feel like he needs, therapy, or like he wants to change, or that he needs this medication. Um, he had even said that he doesn't want to take the medicine because it will lessen the frequency at which he hears his grandmother's voice. Now, after reviewing the DSM-5 and my additional sources, I came to the conclusion that Efren is suffering from brief psychotic disorder. Brief psychotic disorder can be brought on in times of extreme stress. Efren's sudden and or extreme stressor would have been the passing of his grandmother. According to an article titled Brief Psychotic Disorder Associated with Bereavement in Patients with Terminal Stage Uterine Cervical Cancer, brief psychotic disorder, or BPD, is defined as an illness that lasts for at least 1 day, upwards of a month, so from 1 day to a month's time, and in theory, after that month has passed, the individual should return to the pre-morbid level of functioning that they were experiencing prior to the psychotic episode that had befallen them. Now, BPD, or brief psychotic disorder, has a list of symptoms associated with it. And these symptoms are delusions and hallucinations, catatonia, unorganized thoughts, and mood swings. Now, for one to be diagnosed with BPD, this symptoms has to last for at least a day, up to a month, and they need to have at least one of those symptoms exhibited. And as I stated earlier, Efren is suffering from both hallucinations and delusions. And they seemingly came about after the death of his grandmother. Initially, I was thinking that Efren was suffering from a minor form of schizophrenia, but given the timing of his psychotic break and the amount of time that passed since his hospitalization and initial therapy session, schizophrenia is pretty much off the table. Symptoms have to persist for at least 2 months for schizophrenia to be an option. And if we had more to go on in terms of time, it would be it'd be harder to rule out schizophrenia, given the extreme similarities between that and BPD. According to an article about the remission of schizophrenia and bipolar disorder in adolescents with brief psychotic disorder. Um, BPD makes an individual much more likely to get schizophrenia or bipolar disorder down the line. To prevent this from happening, treatment is necessary. For Efren, I would suggest narrative family therapy, for the entire family. I feel that most of the issues that Efren is experiencing and or facing could be resolved with dialogue between him and his entire family. I feel he needs a chance to re-narrate his story, and by doing so, he could get his family to understand things from his specific point of view. This type of therapy will help Efren, take the reins, taking control of his life, and will help him proceed the way he wants to, as opposed to just going through the motions to prevent, future backlash or, things from taking place that he's worried about simply by just going along with the script. He's doing this because he feels he's being forced because he's worried about potential backlash. He's not doing it for the betterment of his well-being. Efren mentioned a couple of times, that he isn't exactly sure that he wants to change, anything about himself, whether it be the voices or the delusions. And NFT or narrative family therapies, outlook that there is no objective truth may be appealing, to his life outlook. There are more than one side to every story. Understanding that he is separate from his problem would be the first step, and then he can create a much happier story. Separating himself from the problem, acknowledging that it's there, separating himself from that, and reauthoring his story would basically be like the order at which he would have to start to tackle this. I believe it is important to have the entire family present for these therapy sessions because they all will play a part in the treatment for Efren. And like I stated earlier, his sister even ran away from home at one point. So it's safe to say that there is some friction, some baggage there that may or may not have been fully addressed, when it happened. But given the family dynamic and what we know from what Everett said, the sister is living with them now, so maybe they did deal with it on some front, but maybe it would be wise to revisit that and get that dialogue started so they can try to understand why she did that, and maybe understand why Efren feels the way he does about certain things and his family in general. The dialogue that's most important is the dialogue that would need to happen between him and his father, who he has the most confrontation with. If we could fix this by having them both share their sides of the story, listen to each other, build their relationship back up, I think that would help the family dynamic immensely. Efren said that he feels that his family doesn't understand him, And with no one else to turn to, he feels completely alone. Creating that environment which will allow him to express himself would be a key factor in his recovery. Now, I think the medication that he is taking, he should continue to take as long as the symptoms are present from his BPD, um, or whatever it is that he's currently suffering from. But as I stated earlier, BPD is supposed to be short term, so it should fade soon. But if it's schizophrenia, if it turns out that indeed it is schizophrenia, then he'll have to work that much harder. Maybe the medication might change, but I still feel like the narrative family therapy would be the right road to take to get the family together, talking about what took place or what had taken place, and basically improve the relationship between all members, leading to a much more productive and happy life for Efren and inevitably all the members of the family, because you never know, they all might be hurt. So I feel like that dialogue between everybody could only help. Thanks for taking the time to listen to this. Once again, this is my week 3 submission for MFT 6102. And my name is Charlie Hogan, and it has been a pleasure. Thank you so much, and you have a wonderful day.